welcome to First Parish in Framingham. I am going to light the Unitarian Universalist faith, which is always fun to try to light. There we go. And I share these words, I believe they are by Billy Collins, titled Shoveling Snow with the Buddha, which was not what I had intended to share, but makes sense given the conditions outside. In the usual iconography of the temple or the local walk, you'd never see him doing such a thing, tossing the dry snow over a mountain of his bare, round shoulder, his hair tied in a knot, a model of concentration. Sitting is more his speed, if that is the word for what he does or does not do. Even the season is wrong for him in all of his manifestations. Is it not warm or slightly humid? Is this not implied by his serene expression, that smile so wide it wraps itself around the waist of the universe? But here we are, working our way down the driveway, one shovelful at a time. We toss the light powder into the clear air. We feel the cold mist on our faces, and with every heave we disappear and become lost to each other in these sudden clouds of our own making, these fountain bursts of snow. This is so much better than a sermon in church, I say out loud, but Buddha keeps on shoveling. This is the true religion, the religion of snow and sunlight and winter geese barking in the sky. I say, but he's too busy to hear me. He has thrown himself into shoveling snow as if it were the purpose of existence, as if it were the sign of a perfect life, were a clear driveway. You could back the car down easily and drive off into the vanities of the world with a broken heater fan and a song on the radio. All morning long we work side by side, me with my commentary and he inside his generous pocket of silence, until the hour is nearly noon. The snow is piled high around us. Then I hear him speak. After this, he asks, can we go inside and play cards? Certainly, I reply, and I will heat some milk and bring cups of hot chocolate to the table while you shuffle the deck, and your boots stand dripping by the door. Ah, says the Buddha, lifting his eyes and leaning for a moment on his shovel before he drives the thin blade again deep into the glittering white snow. We will now hear our opening hymn, Oh, What a Piece of Work Are We?
What a piece of work are we among Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek freedom in knowledge, to serve all life with compassion, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. This is our great covenant, one with another and with our God. The story I have to share with you today is called The Invisible String. It's written by Patrice Karst and illustrated by Joanne Lou Vriehoff. It's dedicated to the children of the world and the magic of their strings. Liza and Jeremy, the twins, were asleep one calm and quiet night. Suddenly it began to rain very loud and very hard. Thunder rumbled until it got so loud that it woke them up. "Mommy, Mommy," they cried out as they ran to her. "Don't worry, you two. It's just the storm making all that noise. We'll go back to bed." "We want to stay close to you," said Jeremy. "We're scared." Mom said, "We're always together, no matter what." "But how can we be together when you're out here and we're in bed?" said Liza.
Rebecca, you might want to try speaking right into the microphone. You're a little off center from it.
Sure, how about that?
Great.
Mom held something right in front of them and said, "This is how." Rubbing their sleepy eyes, the twins came closer to see what it was Mom was holding. "I was about your age when my mommy first told me about the invisible string." "I don't see a string," said Jeremy. "You don't need to see the invisible string. People who love each other are always connected by a very special string made of love." "But if you can't see it, how do you know it's there?" asked Liza. "Even though you can't see it with your eyes, you can feel it with your heart and know that you are always connected to everyone you love." "When you're at school and you miss me, your love travels all the way along the string until I feel it tug on my heart. And when you tug it right back, we feel it in our heart," said Jeremy. "Does Jasper the cat have an invisible string?" Liza asked. "She sure does," said Mom. "And best friends like me and Lucy?" asked Liza. "Best friends too." "How far can the string reach?" "Anywhere and everywhere," Mom said. "Would it reach me even if I were a submarine captain deep in the ocean?" said Jeremy. "Yes," said Mom, "even there." "Or a mountain climber?" "Even there." "A dancer in France?" "Even there." "If I were a jungle explorer?" asked Jeremy. "Even there." "How about an astronaut in outer space?" "Yes, even there." Then Jeremy quietly asked, "Can my string reach all the way to Uncle Brian in heaven?" "Yes, even there." Does the string go away when you're mad at us? Never, said Mom. Love is stronger than anger. And as long as love is in your heart, the string will always be there. Even when you get older and can't agree about things like what movie to see or what game to play in the back seat or what time to go to bed. Oh, that's right. You two should be in bed. And with that, they all laughed as Mom chased the twins back to their beds. Within a few minutes, they were asleep, even though the storm was still making the same loud noises outside. As they slept, they started dreaming of all the invisible strings they have, and all the strings their friends have, and their friends have, and their friends have, until everyone in the world was connected by invisible strings. And from deep inside, they now could clearly see. No one is ever alone. So I wonder, friends, as we move about our weeks together, how we think about the world around us and how we are connected, and even perhaps the world beyond us, after us. How do we stay connected with love in our hearts?
Now is the time in our service that we set aside for sharing of the things which weigh deepest on our hearts. I share this joy from Pat, who writes, after being almost totally deaf these past few months, I believe it is, she writes that her hearing has been restored. My hearing, wearing my hearing aids, has been restored. The isolation is over. And this from Lizzie, who writes, a joy that this weekend my Nana moved closer to family, to new friends and community, and to help if she needs it. Let us now enter into a time of further contemplation, meditation, and perhaps prayer. O Spirit of life and love, named and unnamed, but who calls each one of us beloved, the name before all other names. We give thanks for connection in cold days and isolated times, for improvisation and exploration. We know that it did not have to be this way. May we work, strengthen us, O Spirit of life, to reach out to those who are ill, lonely, struggling with addiction or healing. Let us work to bring peace to all of the war-torn parts of our world, working to end oppression in all forms: racism, anti-Semitism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia. May we work to be love's hands in the world. Let us also remember, because we are human, sometimes wonderfully so, we slip up and trip up with our words. We fumble. We say things that might be hurtful. May we remember that we are loved and lovable not in spite of those imperfections, but because of them. And because we are breathing, there's always time to reconnect, to say, I am sorry, and to rebuild. I say these words and do all things for love's sake. Let us now sit in our separate quiets for just a minute so that we might rest, pray, listen, or simply do nothing for one whole minute. Could be the only time that we don't have to do anything. May it be so, and amen.
The words of our offering this morning come from John Saxon. The light of our chalice would soon flicker and die without the oil that nourishes its flame. And just as this flame cannot burn without oil, this religious community cannot survive or thrive without the financial as well as the personal support of its members and friends. The oil that keeps the flame of our liberal religious faith alive and fuels the shared mission and ministry of this congregation. Let us now give freely and generously an offering to sustain and strengthen our shared religious community, a community of memory, hope, faith, and love. For we are now the keepers of its flame that burns for justice, its dream of beloved community, its vision of a world made whole. If you'd like to contribute, remember that you can go to uuframingham.org and click on the Give Now link. Thank you.
The words for our reading are written by the Reverend Susan Frederick Gray and the Reverend Erica Hewitt. We know that hurt moves through the world, perpetuated by action, inaction, and indifference. Our values call us to live in the reality of the heartbreak of our world, remembering that
no one is outside the circle of love.
We who are Unitarian Universalists not only affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person, we also affirm the inherent worth, the inherent wholeness of every being, despite apparent brokenness.
No one is outside the circle of love.
We know that things break or break down. Promises, friendship, sobriety, hope, communication. The breaking happens because our human hearts and our very institutions are frail and imperfect. We make mistakes. Life is messy.
No one is outside the circle of love.
With compassion as our guide, we seek the whole being of all people, the well-being of all people. We seek to dismantle oppression that undermines our collective humanity. We believe that we're here to guide one another toward love.
No one is outside the circle of love.
No matter how fractured we are or once were, we can make whole people of ourselves. We are whole at our core because of the great, unnameable, sometimes inconceivable love in which we live.
No one is outside the circle of love.
No one is outside the circle of love. The year is around 1815. Throughout the United States, Protestant hellfire and brimstone preaching was ruling the land. And as a result, Universalism was also growing, as people sought the message that there is no hell. It's said that Hosea Ballou once had this interaction. You see, Brother Ballou, as he was known, had a big church in Boston. However, he did a fair bit of circuit riding preaching in places further out from the city. One day after church, he found himself in a family's kitchen. A woman there asked, "You really believe in that all men will be saved just as they are?" Ballou responded, "Well, of course, just as they are." She simply shook her head. She'd been cleaning the house for the Sabbath. Ballou asked her, "What is that in your hand?" And the woman responded, "My mop, of course." Ballou asked, "Are you going to mop the floor just as it is?" "Yes, of course, I mop it to clean it." Ballou responded, "You do not require it to be made clean before you will consent to mop it. Likewise, God saves souls to purify them. That's what salvation is for. God does not require people to be pure in order that he may save them." Ballou's universal salvation was known as ultra universalism, or death and glory universalism, meaning that the punishment for distance from the divine and others was in this life. Imagine that story. Think about its words. You do not require to be made clean before it is considered worthy to be cleaned. How you are right now is fine and good and worthy. Now, I don't know if this story actually happened, but the truth is still there in it. And it highlights one of the views of universalism at that time. Preachers soon started preaching, as they're apt to do, on different views as to when this universal salvation occurred. Disagreeing with Ballou were John Murray and Elihan Winchester, who believed in the eventual restoration of all souls to God, but only after a period of spiritual penance, soul cleansing, and retribution. Sometimes that period of soul cleansing for the especially wicked, they would say, might last up to 50,000 years. In other words, everyone eventually went to heaven, but the ascent might be longer for the especially wicked and sinful. These folks were known as the Restorationists. This led to division and continued name calling for the Universalists. It seems to never have fully resolved itself. Universalism has been around for many centuries. It was originally articulated that God was too good to damn anyone, no matter how they lived their life. However, as I said, there was further nuance about when that final destination would be reached. As you hopefully remember, though who could blame you if you didn't, I'm hoping to preach a series of sermons that explore traditional theological concepts, unpack them, and explore their context in 21st century universalism. We engage in the work of theological translation because sometimes the old words can be reused to bring more love into our world. We engage in this work of packing and unpacking theological language because often people come with baggage from other religious traditions. And now they are new in this new home of Unitarian Universalism, and they're wondering where something they're carrying needs to go. The other reason is that these questions about what do you believe about hell and sin, which we'll really get to talk about sin later, seem to serve as the orientation for others learning about our faith. These serve as the markers or the stars in the constellation when others ask, "So Unitarian Universalism, what's that about?" Of course, we also do this work as part of the ministry. 8 years ago, after much research, the Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association came up with a handy-dandy book called Fulfilling the Call, which breaks the tasks of ministry into 7 overall sections with a grand total of 101 distinct tasks of ministry, one of which is reframing traditional religious language, symbols, and image. What is perhaps most important, and I hope you take away from this, is that the traditional hell as a place of eternal suffering after death is not a concept that Unitarian Universalists adhere to. We believe that no one is a total loss, no matter how much distance there is. It is safe to say that we acknowledge that there is suffering in the world. People find various ways to put up barriers between themselves and others, themselves and the divinity of their understanding and their true, authentic selves. People also find themselves in periods of suffering in their own life that are due to society's systemic failures or systemic oppression. Those times, places, and conditions of suffering may be called hell, but I do not believe it is punishment. It is our duty as Unitarian Universalists to break down the hells in this world. There is hell. It comes from suffering. However, it is not a place we will be condemned to after life has passed from our lungs when we die. It exists in this life. We need to back up a little bit and dive into a deep history of hell first. I invite you to Google or search on your favorite search engine history of hell on your devices after the service. From that, you'll might likely find many books, some of which include the apology in their introduction. So we thought this would be a short essay, but instead we ended up writing an entire book. Even asking the question of the history of hell implies, at least in my mind, that it was created by humans. In the Hebrew Bible, we have a concept of the afterlife, known as Sheol. Joanne M. Pierce explains Sheol as a shadowy, silent pit, where the souls of all the dead lingered in a minimal state of silent existence, forever outside of the presence of God. Now, by the 6th century before the Common Era, Sheol was increasingly viewed as a temporary place, where all the departed awaited a bodily resurrection. The righteous would then dwell in the presence of God, and the wicked would suffer in the fiery torment of a place that was described as a cursed place of fire and smoke. Pierce explains that there was more nuance to the concept of hell in early Christianity. The fate of those in hell, she writes, was described in many ways. Some theologians taught that eventually all evil human beings, and even Satan himself, would be restored to unity with God. Other teachers held that hell was an intermediate state, where some souls would be purified and others annihilated. The image that dominated in antiquity eventually prevailed. Hell was where the souls damned suffered torturous and unending punishment. Even after the resurrection of the dead at the end of the world, the wicked would be sent to hell for eternity. Dante and his towering work, the Inferno, seared into our minds a certain version of hell. Time magazine reminds us that as he spirals down, he sees all sorts of those who have sinned, adulterers, murderers, traitors, and their awful corresponding torments. The modern Catechism of the Catholic Church explains that the chief pain of hell is eternal separation from God. Now, the Universalists, of which we became a part of their history, as I said, had 2 historical perspectives on hell, the Restorationists and the Ultra-Universalists. 2 historical perspectives on when salvation occurred, but what now? What does it mean for our world? If hell is not a destination, but rather a part of the journey where some are now, what then? It means that we have a distinct mission. Salvation of this world rests in our hands. Popular in some clergy circles and in the missional movement is the phrase from a Unitarian Universalist minister from Texas, Joanna Fontaine Crawford: "Love the hell out of this world." I think I've traced its history, and I've asked Joanna myself if she was the originator of it, and she does claim that. Um, she explains that while she was preparing for ministry, each candidate writes an essay describing their theological call to the ministry. And one origin of this comes from when her youngest daughter, or one of her daughters, had cancer at a very young age, and it was treated, and then it came back. And Joanna felt as though she were living in a sort of hell. But what showed up for her was community to help destroy that hell. But in order to more fully appreciate the origin, you have to know a little bit about college football, specifically the traditions of the Texas A&M Aggies in College Station, Texas. Now, I served as the minister of the UU Church of the Brazos Valley, where my office for a time looked out over the imposing stadium of Kyle Field, where the Aggies play. I appreciated the looming nature of Aggie football, an unmistakable feature of the skyline, and indeed a huge part of the culture down there. During their yell practices before home games, think a pep rally on steroids, the yell leaders, think male cheerleaders, would hype the crowd up by hoping that the Aggies beat the hell out of the other team. BTHO, Bama, or LSU, or whatever team they were playing, would become the rallying cry in town for a few hours. My understanding of the story of that Joanna Fontaine Crawford tells us is that her father went to A&M, and that she was well aware of the phrase, since I asked her if it was an intentional reference, and she said it was. It's a clever football joke, but it's also a pithy way to describe our mission: loving the hell out of this world. Reverend Crawford writes, "The hell is all around, and we work in great passionate swoops and in slow plodding routines to put the extravagant love into action and remove all the bits of it from the world. Misery, ill health, disease, viciousness of greed in the face of want, voices that shout hate or whisper meanness, soul-eating addiction, humiliation, despair, injustice that curls up nastily, poisoning the spirit of giver and receiver. We do not flee. Bone-chilling afraid we may be, but we step forward. We are the only form love will take, and the work is ours to do. Our job, our mission is to take all of that love," she writes, "all that overflowing, passionate, and undying agape, and train it on the hell that exists in this world." There's a joke that we could make about this. There's a sign at a conference, and one direction points to heaven, and the other discussion points to one sign points to heaven, and the other sign is a discussion of heaven. And in this joke, as it's originally told, each UU chooses to go to the discussion of heaven instead. This mission of loving the hell out of this world introduces a third option. Given the choice between heaven, hell, and that discussion group, Unitarian Universalists ought to choose hell to save everyone there, literally loving everyone out of hell. The Reverend Susan Frederick Gray expands it by reminding us that our Unitarian, or rather our Universalist ancestors didn't believe in hell, except for the ones here in this life that we create. What would it mean to show up in the places where hell, where suffering and violence, persecution and inhumanity prevail, and to bring an active, powerful form of love that affirms dignity, liberation, and peace? It would mean leaving the confines of privilege to show up in solidarity and engaging and being in the struggle with those most directly impacted by injustice. By acknowledging that there is brokenness and distance, we can work toward the restoration of the world. It is not a bad thing when we fail. Given a cosmic bank account, I'd hazard to guess that we all have some debits in it every now and then. Regardless of what we believe about the divine, we know that there is injustice in our world, that sins that need redeeming in some way. The work rests in our hands. We cannot do it alone. It is universal salvation because it depends on all of us, all of our hands, hearts, and minds. What then is universal salvation? It's that invisible thread that we heard about in the Time for All Ages. It is the thing that connects you to me and you to everyone you know and love. It's the thing that connects us to everyone that we don't know and that we don't love. It's the thing that connects us, whether we are good or bad, whether we want it or not. My friends, watching this together yet apart on this snowy morning, we have a mission, and it is simple: to love the hells out of this world, to be the invisible thread that keeps all of humanity connected and together. It is our job to work to find ways to end suffering in this lifetime, even if it is your own little portion of the world. May we each find ways to live into this mission and to be a blessing to our world. May it be so. Let's now hear our closing hymn, which is number 1012, When I Am Frightened.
When I am frightened, will you reassure me? When I'm uncertain, will you hold my hand? Will you be strong for me, sing to me quietly? Will you share some of your stories with me? If you will show me compassion, then I may learn to care as you do. Then I may learn to care. When I am angry, will you still embrace me? When I am thoughtless, will you understand? Will you believe in me, stand by me willingly? Will you share some of your questions with me? If you will show me acceptance, then I may learn to give as you do. Then I may learn to give. When I am troubled, will you listen to me? When I am lonely, will you be my friend? Will you be there for me, comfort me tenderly? Will you share some of your feelings with me? If you will show me commitment, then I may learn to love as you do. Then I may learn to love.
Muted myself. As we leave this friendly place, let us take the light of love out into the world and use it to brighten our pathways. Even though there is much light reflected, sometimes we need to be a light as well. May that light hold us always. And when we need to rest or recharge, be challenged or affirmed, may that light guide us safely back. May we hold the light always and the light hold us always. Amen. And go in peace. We have one more piece of music from Dean.